Very, very interesting. What is going on out there, peeps? Okay, so I do have a friend. He's a we'll just call him a businessman. All right. I don't want to get too far into it. Anyways, me and him talk geopolitics all the time. But I couldn't help but bring up this fact, and that is, I find it interesting that Saudi is interested in helping out Iraq. So for those of you who are not familiar, Saudi Arabia is not exactly the most friendliest of nations. In other words, they don't help their fellow Arab nations out unless they can get something in return. It's just not the way they operate. So as I'm talking to my friend, we're talking about a specific silver coin that I want from him that he collects. And then it dawned on me. I said, hey, by the way, I couldn't help but notice both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia reaching out to do deals with Iraq. I find it interesting that Saudi is interested at all. They must want something. He goes, of course they do. I said, well, what do they want? He goes, their water. And I said, the what? He goes, their water. Their water? He goes, yeah, agriculture and water. So I started doing a little digging. And I found out that Saudi Arabia spends a boatload of money every year for farmland and the desalination of water. So I find this very interesting. So let's go over what he ran past me was the proposal. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but now we know why Saudi Arabia is interested in Iraq big time, besides the fact that they share a pretty big port between them that would be used as the main import-export of the Middle East. That's another biggie. But water in agriculture is big. Saudi Arabia does not have enough water, not only for them not to drink, but I'm going to show you a piece of a video that this guy done a great job of explaining what was going on, because I was trying to find something out there. So I find this very interesting because it's almost to the point where Saudi Arabia is just about willing to do anything to get access to a lot of water. And Iraq is close to Saudi Arabia versus everybody else. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here is Iraq. Here's Saudi Arabia. The thought that was thrown out there was this: is either rerouting the Euphrates, which I don't see that happening, I really don't, or splintering off a pipeline from Euphrates River. Okay, so very, very interesting, very interesting. So the other idea is down here, is somehow routing or piping off the water from here where the two rivers run in and coming through Kuwait is the other option that they're talking about. So this could be why you're seeing Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq all talking right now. There might be something much bigger going on. Iraq does phenomenal with agriculture once they get their, what together. All right. Saudi Arabia, yeah, they are not doing very good. I'm going to show you on this video, and then I'm going to show you what the proposal was. Now, this actual proposal was sent. This is not his first time around, just so you know. It was offered like 6 or 7 years ago, and it was turned down. Very, very interesting. But let's watch this video, a part of it anyways, so you can see what I'm talking about. Listen.
Due to water scarcity, it is an enormous challenge for Saudi Arabia to maintain agriculture and avoid being almost completely dependent on imports. In order to more efficiently use rainfall for agriculture and water supply, several dams were built, especially in the southwest of the country, creating reservoirs. Noteworthy is the Beige Dam, as well as the King Fahd Dam, which has the largest reservoir in the country. In the rest of the country, rain is both rare and irregular, and is therefore not sufficient for maintaining profitable livestock and agriculture. In the 1970s and 1980s, there was a political desire to gain self-sufficiency, and the country pushed ahead with a number of initiatives to modernize the agricultural sector. And if you look at the desert from space, you now see large agricultural areas full of crop circles that result from the center pivot irrigation. The water required for this is pumped from deep below the surface, from aquifers that filled up during the Ice Age, when climate in this region was significantly cooler. With the help of this water, which accumulated thousands of years ago, large areas can be used for agriculture. But there are also lots of difficulties. After all, the groundwater in this region is virtually non-renewable because there hardly is any rain. Saudi Arabia is suffering from a rapid depletion of water in its underground aquifers, and the country's agriculture sector is disintegrating. The groundwater level at the Al Asa aquifer has dropped by 150 meters, which is about 490 feet, within just 25 years. And the circular green fields in the desert are rapidly fading. In 2008, Saudi Arabia had to adjust course. They gave up on the idea of turning their deserts into fertile farmland. This statistic shows the annual wheat production in Saudi Arabia. The reforms of the 1980s led to an immense increase, but ever since 2008, this number went completely down. And when we lay over the amount of imported wheat, we see the change in strategy that occurred in 2008. The Initiative for Agricultural Investment Abroad was launched. The goal is to buy and manage land in other countries in order to save water at home. Saudi food companies are acquiring farmland in Argentina and through subsidiary companies in Arizona and California. They mainly grow alfalfa hay, which is then imported to Saudi Arabia and used as cow feed. And by doing it this way, they don't have to stress their own aquifers so much. So essentially, they are importing water. They also lease land in Sudan, as well as in Zambia and to a large extent in Ethiopia. There already is a lease between the Saudi Star plc for an area of 140,000 hectares in Ethiopia, and the long-term goal of the Saudi company is to rent up to 500,000 hectares. Such investments can create water conflict, as many of the regions in which land is leased already suffer from water shortages themselves.
You can see clearly that as time goes on, Saudi Arabia is more and more of a serious crunch as far as their agriculture is concerned. If that video goes on to talk about they spend billions of dollars every year on desalination. For those of you who don't know what that means, is when they take the ocean water and they take the salt water and they separate the salt from the water. The problem is the leftover residue creates what's called a brine, and the brine is pushed into the ocean, and it's causing environmental damages. So as much as they love to desalinize the water there, they can only do so much of it before they do some irreversible damage on their coastline, and then they won't be able to do that in the first place. Okay? Iraq, on the other hand, has plenty of fertile farmland, and they're very, very close by. Now, the idea of rerouting Euphrates River, I can't see that happening. As a matter of fact, that was one of the proposals, and it was flatly, and rightfully so, was turned down. Now, I can see where you could create some, split offs, like, have some piping, so you're not rerouting the whole river, but part of it. You can just have some piping run, like different pipings all along the river coming through here. Is that expensive? Yeah, but it's cheaper than what the hell they're doing now. Way cheaper than what the hell they're doing now. So one or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to come up with an agreement and they are going to pipe water through Iraq into Saudi Arabia. They're not going to reroute the Euphrates River. That's not going to happen. Or they're going to find a way to come off where the two rivers meet together, Tigris and Euphrates, and pipe it through Kuwait and into Saudi Arabia. In addition to that, they want to lease a boatload of land from Iraq for the sole purpose of growing agriculture there. And so here's the thing, as rich as Saudi Arabia is, what good does it do to have all the money that they have, but they can't feed their people, or they can't, give them agriculture. They can't, raise cattle, that they have to keep relying on outside people, or there's no water for the people. Okay? It's just becoming more and more expensive every year. So that guy goes on to say that over the next 25 years, puts Saudi Arabia dang near desolate unless they could come up with an option. So, as much as Iraq needs Saudi Arabia, it seems to me that Saudi Arabia needs Iraq a little bit more. Just because without their water and without their agriculture, then, Saudi Arabia is going to be forced to take other extreme measures. As much money as they're pumping out, they have something like 27 desalination stations. They're renting land everywhere. They're creating dams everywhere to try to find a way to store up water that is needed in order for them to survive. So, in essence, the water that Iraq has is actually more valuable than their oil. Yes, the water has now become more valuable than the oil. So when we sit around, we're trying to guess all the time, how is Iraq going to be able to do this exchange rate for the Iraqi dinar? Well, it helps if you have some really, really rich friends that can help you carry some of the burden of the exchange. So if you look at future projects and future contracts that Iraq might be getting into, and this includes with Kuwait, by the way, between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, which is two of the richest countries, that puts Iraq in a very unique place. The problem is in the past, they had so many corrupt politicians that they never got anything really settled. But if you get the right political group in there, that's there for the people, that's put there by the people, and they come up with these agreements, Iraq could afford, because they have more than two huge lakes. On this map, you can see two huge lakes, but there's more than that. They can afford and easily pipe water into Saudi Arabia by creating these pipelines all the way from the Euphrates. Now, again, does that cost a lot? No, these people are leasing land. They're buying water and importing it. They're 27 or 22 desalination locations. These things are really, really super expensive compared to just creating these pipelines and then maintaining them. So if you start running these pipes, sure, that's a lot of land. Sure it is. But think about how much money Saudi Arabia has. And we're talking about piping, all right? It would take years for it to happen. I get it. That's if these people agree. And the cool thing is this, Iraq is in a unique situation. Because if they control the on and off valve of the water, you understand the position that puts them in with Saudi Arabia. You see where I'm going with this? Do you see the unique position that Iraq is in? So anyways, I just thought I would share this with you because I did notice that Saudi Arabia all of a sudden wants to be a player on what's going on in Iraq. And I know they want to invest in there, but I could not figure out what it is they wanted. Seriously, they already have oil. What else could they possibly want? So when I was talking to my friend, he was like, what do you mean? Water. And I was like, water? He's like, yeah, water. And I was like, I got to look into this. Sure enough, I looked into it, and that's what it is. So however long ago the proposal to reroute the Euphrates River was turned down, and I agree with that. Don't reroute the river. You could just as easily put some pipes there and just drain off some of the water that runs down into Iraq and into Saudi Arabia is what they could do. Now, if Saudi Arabia was smart, they would build like the world's largest swimming pool. Of course, I'm kidding. Like you could out in the middle of the desert build one huge man-made lake. They don't have one there. So if you're running these pipelines from the Euphrates and other rivers that run through there, because these are two main rivers, there are other ones, and you can also see two big lakes there. There are other ones. So if Saudi Arabia is going to go through that, it really would. Sure, they could pay the ton of money up front, and it would save them a ton of money on the back end. So that's what's going on. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are buddying up with Iraq. I think the need is Iraq needs the money. They need help with infrastructure. They need help rebuilding the country. And Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are the perfect partners to do this. Both countries need water, by the way. And so I can see where Saudi Arabia, somewhere right in here, I mean, seriously, Saudi Arabia can literally afford to build the world's largest man-made lake of just concrete. Think about this. Miles and miles and miles long and deep as can be. And once you start draining off, sure, it's going to take a little while for the man-made lake to fill up. But it wouldn't, and eventually it would happen. And then what happens is you can start piping off your man-made lake into where the houses are, where people need water. You can start agriculture. You know, do you see where I'm going with this? I think this is a good idea. I just couldn't figure out why Saudi Arabia was wanting to partner up with Iraq. And so it looks like that's the direction they're going into. So isn't that something? Come to find out, Iraq has something that is more valuable than oil to the Saudi people and to the Kuwaiti people. They have water. Water and agriculture. All right, you guys, there you go. Two things that are outside of oil that could generate revenue needed for the Iraqi government. Man, it's crazy because I wonder how much money they would charge Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia is charging people X amount of dollars per barrel for oil, I mean, seriously, I wonder how much they would lease the land, by the way. They would lease the land or lease the water. So I don't know how you lease water. It's not reusable. So there you go, you guys. And talking with my friend, he just sprung something on me that caught me totally off guard. And so I went out and did a little research, did find a couple of videos, but I shared one with you that shows you that Saudi Arabia, within the next 25 years, needs to find a way to do something about getting water into their country and doing something about their agriculture. And that's also going to help their cattle situation as well. All right. So, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. So it looks like now we know why Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are all slapping high fives and fist pumping and being buddies. All right. So that's what's going on. I thought I would share it with you because it does affect our dinar. It affects it because if they can continue to keep finding outside ways to make money in country, that only makes our currency that much more stronger. All right, you guys, I hope this is something you guys like and would appreciate me sharing with you. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.